Welcome back to another episode. Guys, I hope that you guys got the rest that you needed. I slept really hard. I slept like a baby, guys. Oh, where's my coffee? One moment, guys, okay? I had my coffee already. What did I do with it? Oh, it's right here. Sorry. But anyways, guys, we got to get into this. This is the strongest storm on earth is coming. So we're going to check this out so that we all can be prepared far ahead of time. It's not in the mainlands as of yet, but it's headed to the mainlands, okay? So take note and take precaution and do everything that you need to do before this strongest storm on earth hits mainland, okay? I'm not going to chitter chatter too much, so let's get started. And please do have a nice day and be nice and stay safe. And subscribe and come in, okay? Let's begin.
175 miles per hour. And the terrifying part is that these islands are still in ruins from the last super typhoon that hit them just 3 months ago. A back-to-back worst-case scenario. Two catastrophic storms in the same year, hitting the same tiny islands, with the second one potentially stronger than the first. Today we're breaking down everything. What Bava is, how strong it got, what the islands experienced, and what comes next as this storm rolls toward Taiwan and China. No filler, no guessing. Just the facts and
Oh, it's headed towards Taiwan and China right now, guys, at this moment. And here we are. See the red line here? This is where it is. Okay, so let's continue.
Full picture of what happened and what is still happening. If you want updates every time a storm like this develops, make sure you are subscribed and notifications are on. You do not want to miss real-time coverage on something this serious. A thumbs up also tells the system to show this to more people who need the information. Now, let us go. Super Typhoon Bobby started as a relatively unremarkable cluster of tropical convection
Super
east of the
Typhoon
Philippines in late
Bobby.
June 2026. On July the 2nd, meteorologists were tracking it as a newly organized tropical storm, System 9, in the Western Pacific typhoon season.
They started tracking this in July, guys. This is how huge it is. Let's continue.
It had not fully formed yet. It was organized. People were barely paying attention to it. That changed fast. By Thursday, July 3rd, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center based in Hawaii had already designated it Tropical Storm Bava and was flagging it for rapid intensification. The storm was moving west-northwest at around...
And we've not heard anything on the news about this Hurricane Bobby.
12 miles per hour, being steered by a subtropical ridge to its northeast. The conditions ahead of it were almost perfectly designed to make a tropical storm into something terrifying. Extremely warm ocean water, low wind shear, and high humidity throughout the atmosphere. By Saturday, on July 4th, Bobby had already reached Category 5 status. Maximum sustained winds of 165 miles per hour with gusts even higher. The eye, about 21 miles wide, became well-defined as the central dense overcast grew more
hold
symmetrical.
up, guys. One moment. 21 miles wide? Let's continue.
Dropped sharply. Satellite imagery showed a classic textbook super typhoon structure. Yale Climate Connections meteorologists Jeff Masters and Bob Henson described what they were seeing as a system that appeared poised to become a dangerous Category 4 or Category 5 super typhoon within 24 hours of its first advisories. What actually happened was even faster than that. Bobby went from a disorganized tropical storm to a Category 5 super typhoon in approximately 2 days. That is the definition of rapid intensification, a phrase that has become increasingly common and increasingly terrifying in recent tropical seasons. The fuel driving all of this was the Western Pacific Ocean surface. Water temperatures in the region Bobby was crossing were exceptionally warm, providing nearly limitless energy for the storm to consume. A tropical cyclone is essentially a heat engine. It pulls warm, moist...
Guys, I don't know if you noticed or not, I have a temperature thingy in the backyard, and the grounds have been extremely hot under the earth, guys. Let's continue.
Air from the ocean surface upward into towering thunderstorm clusters around its center, releasing that energy as it rises and condenses. The warmer the water, the more energy available. The more energy available, the faster and stronger the storm can grow. June 2026 was the second warmest June globally on record, according to the Copernicus Climate Change Service. The global average surface temperature that month was 1.39 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Those warmer than average ocean temperatures in the Western Pacific were a direct factor in how explosively Bobby developed. To understand why Bobby was such a catastrophic situation for the Northern Mariana Islands and Guam, you need to know what happened just 3 months earlier. On April 14th, 2026, Super Typhoon Senlaku made direct landfall over the Northern Mariana Islands, with the large eye passing over both Tinian and Saipan simultaneously. At its peak, Sinlaku had sustained winds of 185 miles per hour and a central pressure as low as 890 millibars, making it one of the strongest typhoons ever recorded in the Western Pacific. Sinlaku's movement at landfall was particularly brutal. It was moving slowly, which meant it subjected the islands to an extended battering rather than passing through quickly. The storm dumped over 20 inches of rain on parts of the islands, caused widespread flooding, knocked out power.
Guys, when a hurricane moves slow, when a hurricane's move slow, that means it does a whole lot of more damage. You want the hurricane to come through quickly. So this is what he meant by that. Let's continue.
Power across large portions of Tinian and Saipan and caused catastrophic structural damage throughout the region. Total estimated damage to the Northern Mariana Islands and Guam from Sinlaku was placed at approximately $1.5 billion. 6 people died, including members of a crew on a cargo vessel that capsized near Pagan Island during the storm. When Bava began organizing in early July, parts of Tinian and Saipan were still without electricity. 2.5 months after Sinlaku, the power grid had not been fully restored. Emergency shelters were still in use, homes with tarps instead of roofs, infrastructure still compromised.
Guys, Hurricane Bobby is headed our way.
Category 5, tracking toward the same islands, predicted at that point to be potentially even more powerful than the first. NPR reported that as Bava approached, shelters on the islands were packed and turning people away. An emergency official in Guam told reporters that they had many vulnerable communities across northern Guam, people living in substandard building materials, and that from what he had heard from Saipan and Tinian, the situation was dire. The National Weather Service in an earlier update had used explicit language. This is an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation. A government official in Guam said publicly, "We aim for 0 fatalities, and my gosh, I hope that is how it turns out. It is going to be a rough night and a rough day." The Port Authority of Guam suspended operations entirely. Schools and hospitals across the region were expected to be affected. Anderson Air Force Base on Guam asked all non-essential personnel to stay off the base. These are some of the most significant U.S. military installations in the entire Pacific region, and they were buttoning down for a Category 5 storm. This is where the uncertainty in the days before Bava made landfall created significant anxiety for emergency managers across all 4 islands. The main question going into the weekend of July 4th through July 6th was exactly which islands would take the worst of it. The models were split. The American GFS model placed the center of Bava tracking directly over Tinian and Saipan, the same 2 islands already devastated by Sinlaku in April. Under that scenario, Guam and Rota to the south would experience strong tropical storm conditions at minimum, with Tinian and Saipan absorbing the full force of the eye wall. The European ECMWF model tracked Bava slightly further south, placing the center closer to Rota and Guam. That scenario would shift the catastrophic eye wall winds toward Guam and Rota, while Tinian and Saipan would experience typhoon-level impacts rather than a direct eye wall passage. The difference between those 2 scenarios is the difference between a catastrophic direct hit and a severely damaging but potentially survivable event. Both scenarios were terrifying. The only question was, which community would take the worst of it? What actually happened was that Bava's center passed over Rota on Monday morning local time July 6th. Rota, an island of approximately 2,000 people, the southernmost island of the Northern Mariana chain, located about 40 miles northeast of Guam, took the eye wall. Winds on Rota exceeded 150 miles per hour as the eye passed directly overhead. Local authorities on Rota reported major damages immediately, though full damage assessment was difficult due to severely disrupted communications. Guam, which lies roughly 50 miles southwest of Rota, experienced maximum sustained wind gusts of 111 miles per hour during the storm. Saipan also recorded gusts of 111 miles per hour. Guam set a new daily rainfall record at its international airport, 1,264 inches of rain in a single day. Let us put some hard numbers around just how powerful this storm was, because the phrases Category 5 and Super Typhoon can start to feel abstract without context. At peak intensity before landfall, Bava was carrying maximum sustained winds of 175 miles per hour or higher, with gusts exceeding that significantly. To put 175 miles per hour in context, hurricane force winds are defined as sustained winds of 74 miles per hour or higher. A Category 5 hurricane or typhoon requires sustained winds of 157 miles per hour. Bava was comfortably into Category 5 territory and sitting near the top of it. The storm's central pressure, the measure of how deep the storm is, dropped dramatically during its rapid intensification phase. Computer model guidance was projecting central pressure as low as 910 millibars as it approached the islands. Lower pressure means stronger storm. For reference, the strongest typhoon ever recorded in history, Typhoon Tip in 1979, had a central pressure of 870 millibars. Sinlaku in April 2026 had touched 890 millibars. Bava at 910 millibars was in the same tier of extreme storms that scientists track as historically significant events. The eye diameter was measured at approximately 21 miles across, well-defined and symmetric. Satellite imagery from the Copernicus Sentinel-3 satellite, captured on July 6th, showed the eye of Bavi close to Rota, with winds at the island exceeding 240 kilometers per hour. The storm's dense cloud bands completely obscured Guam, Tinian, and Saipan from the satellite view at the time of image acquisition.
This is Hurricane Bobby, guys. It's headed our way.
Threat. The National Weather Service forecast over 250 millimeters of rain, that is approximately 10 inches, and up to 450 millimeters in some locations, roughly 18 inches, depending on how close the eye wall passed. Flash flooding and coastal inundation were expected regardless of which island took the direct hit. Storm surge, the wall of water pushed inland by a tropical cyclone's winds, is one of the most deadly aspects of any major typhoon, and with Bavi's intensity, the surge threat was extreme along low-lying coastal areas. With all of that, a Category 5 storm, 175 mile per hour winds, a direct hit on Rota, typhoon conditions across Guam, Tinian, and Saipan. Here is what is genuinely remarkable. As of the time reporting was available, no deaths had been confirmed on Guam or the Northern Mariana Islands from Super Typhoon Bavi. Think about that. A storm with winds exceeding 150 miles per hour passed directly over an island of 2,000 people. Major damage was widespread, infrastructure was hit hard, communications were disrupted. And yet the communities came through without confirmed fatalities. The Commonwealth Utilities Corporation was already working to restore power to Tinian, though dealing with infrastructure that had already been compromised by Sinlaku's April hit. It was an island that had barely recovered from one catastrophic storm trying to handle another. The zero fatalities outcome is not luck. It is the product of preparation. Emergency officials had been issuing warnings days before Bavi arrived.
Exactly, guys. It's time to prep now. You don't prep for a hurricane when it's 3 miles away from the mainland. You do it now. Let's continue.
Shelters were opened across the islands even if they filled to capacity. The Port Authority suspended operations. Military bases went to full preparation posture. People were told clearly and repeatedly, be in your safe location by Saturday night because Sunday conditions will go downhill fast. Get inside before the winds arrive. Do not go outside during the eye wall passage. Treat the approach of extreme winds like a tornado is coming and move immediately to an interior room. That public communication, honest, specific, urgent, without being panic-inducing, combined with communities that have unfortunately been through enough typhoons to take warnings seriously, is why those islands survived Bava without adding to the death toll. The lesson from Bavi is the same lesson Japan teaches the world with every earthquake. The storm's intensity is nature. The survival rate is a human choice made in advance. After battering the Mariana Islands, it did not simply dissipate. The storm moved westward at around 9 miles per hour into the Philippine Sea, still packing sustained winds over 150 miles per hour. The Western Pacific provides warm water across enormous stretches of ocean, and Bavi was tracking through an environment that allowed it to maintain extreme strength well past landfall on Rota. With the Mariana Islands behind it, the next question for meteorologists watching Bavi was its eventual destination after crossing the Philippine Sea. The forecast consensus at the time of reporting was that Bavi would gradually weaken as it moved westward and eventually northwestward, encountering slightly cooler waters and potentially increasing wind shear. But the storm was expected to remain a powerful typhoon, equivalent to a Category 2 or stronger hurricane by wind standards, as it approached Taiwan. Landfall in Taiwan was being forecast for approximately Saturday to July 11th or thereabouts, with the storm then moving into mainland China. Even at reduced Category 2 equivalent intensity, Bavi approaching Taiwan would represent a serious threat. Taiwan's mountainous terrain causes orographic enhancement. Rainfall is dramatically amplified as storms are forced up and over mountain ranges.
Guys, it seems as if it's Hurricane Bava. I thought he was saying Bobby, but it's Bavia. Let's continue. I'll change it in the thumbnail.
Flash flooding and landslides become major risks even when sustained winds have dropped below super typhoon levels. After Taiwan, Bavi was expected to continue into parts of southern or southeastern China, bringing flash flooding and additional wind impacts to a significant area of coastline. Tropical systems crossing the Philippine Sea and striking Taiwan and China in late July are not unusual in a climatological sense. The Western Pacific typhoon season reaches its statistical peak between July and October. What made Bavi notable was the combination of its intensity in the open ocean and the fact that it was arriving on the heels of Sinlaku, the April storm that caused over $1.5 billion in damage and left the Northern Marianas still in recovery. A second storm was also being monitored by meteorologists in early July. a separate tropical system coming out of the Philippines and tracking toward China with tropical storm level impacts. That system was expected to bring 100 to 200 millimeters of rain to parts of China's coast before dissipating,
Jeez.
separate from and smaller than Bavi,
Wow.
but adding to an already active pattern. Meteorologists were also watching the Bay of Bengal for potential development in the days following Bavi's landfall, a completely separate area of the tropics, monitoring whether conditions there might support tropical storm formation in the early to mid-July timeframe. You cannot look at Super Typhoon Bavi and Super Typhoon Sinlaku hitting the same islands twice in 3 months without asking a bigger question.
Jeez.
Is this normal? Is this getting worse? And what is actually driving the intensity of storms like these? Let us deal with the facts here, because this is a topic where it is easy to oversimplify in both directions. The total number of tropical cyclones globally has not dramatically increased compared to historical records. What has changed, and what the data consistently shows, is that the strongest storms, Category 4 and Category 5 intensity, are becoming a higher proportion of all storms that form. The storms that do reach major intensity are reaching it faster, holding it longer, and in some cases, achieving it closer to coastlines than historical patterns would have predicted. The mechanism is straightforward physics. Tropical cyclones are heat engines powered by warm ocean water. Warmer water provides more energy. More energy means stronger potential intensity. Ocean temperatures in the Western Pacific, the most active typhoon basin on Earth, have been running above historical averages in recent years, consistent with a broader pattern of ocean warming. June 2026, being the second warmest June globally, as confirmed by the Copernicus Climate Change Service, is part of that broader trend. Rapid intensification, the same process that turned Bavi from a disorganized tropical storm to a Category 5 in roughly 48 hours, is particularly concerning because it compresses the warning time that coastal communities have to prepare. If a storm takes 5 days to gradually build to Category 5 strength, emergency managers have 5 days of increasingly urgent lead time to communicate warnings and move people to safety. If a storm goes from a tropical storm to Category 5 in 2 days, while still 600 miles from the coast, the preparation window shrinks dramatically. Bavi intensified fast, but the forecasting community caught it early enough that Guam and the Northern Marianas had several days of warning. The National Weather Service, Joint Typhoon Warning Center, and local emergency managers all performed well. That lead time is why nobody died. But the Western Pacific Islands, Guam, Saipan, Tinian, Rota, face a particular vulnerability that is worth understanding. They are tiny, they have small populations, they have limited infrastructure to begin with, and they now sit in a typhoon pattern that has produced 2 Category 5 or near Category 5 storms in the same year, hitting the same geography, leaving almost no time between them for meaningful recovery. When Sinlaku knocked out power to Tinian and Saipan in April, and Bavi arrived in July with those communities still running on damaged grid infrastructure, the compounding effect is severe in ways that the damage numbers alone do not fully capture. $1.5 billion in damage from Sinlaku and a combined Guam and Northern Marianas population of roughly 200,000 people is an enormous economic burden. Bavi, adding additional damage on top of that to infrastructure already weakened, amplifies the recovery challenge significantly. The Western Pacific is the most active tropical cyclone basin on Earth. More storms form here, and storms here reach higher peak intensities than in any other ocean basin in the world. The warm waters, the favorable atmospheric setup, and the vast stretch of open ocean available for intensification all combine to make the Western Pacific the generator of Earth's most powerful weather systems. The typical Western Pacific typhoon season produces around 25 to 30 named storms. Not all of them become typhoons. Not all typhoons become super typhoons. But the basin consistently generates the strongest storm seen anywhere on the planet in a given year. The 2026 Western Pacific season, by the time Bavi struck in early July, had already produced 7 tropical cyclones. 3 of them made landfall.
Bava has
Sinlaku in
been on the
April had been a Category
move.
4 at
My,
landfall with a peak of
my.
Category 5 in open water. Bavi in early July reached Category 5 and maintained it through landfall on Rota. The season was tracking as an active one, consistent with elevated sea surface temperatures, and a neutral to weak La Nina pattern that historically favors increased Western Pacific typhoon activity.
And guys, this is in real time. This is current. Okay? Let's continue.
The forecasting community had been tracking the potential for a system in Bavi's Genesis region for several days before it fully organized. The transition from identified area of interest to tropical storm to Category 5 super typhoon in under 72 hours, while dramatic, was consistent with what the environmental conditions supported. No forecast surprises, just the atmosphere doing exactly what the physics said it would do. For the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, and southern China, the regions that Western Pacific typhoons typically threaten after crossing open water, Bavi's trajectory after the Marianas was being watched extremely carefully. The Philippine government was monitoring. Taiwanese authorities were assessing track and timing. Southern Japanese prefectures on Kyushu, Shikoku, and central Honshu were expecting elevated rainfall totals in the hundreds of millimeters range, even from peripheral moisture bands associated with the system. The Western Pacific does not take breaks. The peak of typhoon season still lay ahead as Bava crossed the Philippine Sea. August, September, and October historically bring the highest frequency of intense storms in the basin. The 2026 season was already demonstrating it was not going to be a quiet one. Whether you are in Guam, the Northern Marianas, Taiwan, the Philippines, southern Japan, or coastal China, or anywhere in a region that typhoons reach, the lessons from Bava are practical and worth keeping in mind every typhoon season. Early warnings exist for a reason. The National Weather Service, Joint Typhoon Warning Center, and local meteorology agencies put out typhoon warnings days in advance specifically, so communities have time to act. Waiting until the storm is hours away to start preparations is too late. When a super typhoon is 5 days out and forecasters are already calling it life-threatening, that is the moment to start acting, not when the outer rain bands start arriving. Evacuation centers save lives. In Guam and the Northern Marianas, the fact that shelters were packed, even past capacity, before Bava arrived is exactly why the death toll was zero. People who live in vulnerable structures, older buildings, homes with already damaged roofs from Sinlaku, coastal properties susceptible to storm surge, have to make the move to a shelter before conditions deteriorate. Once winds exceed tropical storm force, movement outside becomes dangerous. Once typhoon force winds arrive, it can become impossible. Being aware of storm surge is as critical as wind awareness. A lot of people focus on the wind speeds because those are the numbers that get repeated. But historically, storm surge, the abnormal rise in sea level driven by a storm's winds pushing water toward shore, is responsible for the majority of deaths in tropical cyclones worldwide. A Category 5 typhoon approaching a low-lying island or coastal area can produce storm surge of 20 feet or more in extreme cases. That wall of water is not survivable in a typical structure in its direct path. Communication plans matter enormously. During and immediately after Bavi's landfall on Rota, communications were severely disrupted. The 2,000-person island lost contact with the outside world for a period that made damage assessment difficult. Having a plan for how to communicate with family members during and after a major storm, knowing where people will shelter, having a pre-designated check-in plan, reduces panic and helps emergency responders understand where assistance is needed most urgently. Super Typhoon Bava came screaming out of the Western Pacific in early July 2026 as potentially the strongest storm on Earth at that moment. It hit communities already broken by Sinlaku 3 months earlier, delivered sustained winds of 175 miles per hour at its peak, dumped record rainfall on Guam, and passed a direct eye wall over the island of Rota, with winds exceeding 150 miles per hour. And it killed nobody on Guam or the Northern Mariana Islands. That outcome is not a miracle. It is what happens when warnings are issued early, communities take them seriously, emergency systems work, and people move to safety before conditions make it impossible.
Right.
After everything those islands have been through, Sinlaku in April, more than 2 months without full power on Tinian and Saipan, and now Bava in July, the zero fatality outcome is a testament to the resilience and preparation of those communities. The storm is now heading toward Taiwan and China with diminishing, but still significant intensity. The Western Pacific typhoon season is not even close to over. More storms will form, more warnings will be issued. And the lesson from Bava, prepare early, act decisively, take every warning seriously, applies every single time. Stay subscribed for updates as Bava continues its track, and as new systems develop across the Pacific. Get the word out. Share this video. And if you are in a region currently under any typhoon watch or warning, please act on the official guidance from your local emergency services right now. One of the most discussed aspects of Super Typhoon Bava among meteorologists was how quickly it went from a system that barely existed to one of the strongest storms on the planet. That process has a name in atmospheric science: rapid intensification. And understanding it matters because it is happening more frequently and catching coastal communities off guard with less warning time than historical patterns provided. Rapid intensification is defined technically as an increase in maximum sustained winds of at least 35 miles per hour within a 24-hour period. Bava exceeded that threshold dramatically. From a disorganized tropical storm to a Category 5 super typhoon in roughly 48 hours is an extreme example of the phenomenon, but it is consistent with what the environmental conditions over the Western Pacific in early July 2020 supported. 3 conditions have to line up for rapid intensification to occur. First, the ocean needs to be warm, not just the surface, but down through the upper layers, because a powerful storm churns up deeper water as it moves. If that deeper water is cold, it cools the surface temperature beneath the eye and cuts off the storm's energy supply. The Western Pacific in July 2026 had anomalously warm temperatures extending well below the surface, providing essentially a...
Guys, this is what he's saying under the ocean floor. This is hot. You see, this is why it's red and orange. This is what caused catastrophic typhoon hurricanes. Let's continue.
limited fuel for Bavy's intensification engine. Second, wind shear. The change in wind speed and direction with altitude needs to be low. High wind shear essentially tears apart a developing tropical cyclone, preventing the organized structure of towering thunderstorms around the eye from establishing and maintaining itself. Bava moved through an environment of low wind shear in its early development phase, allowing it to build and organize without atmospheric interference. Third, the storm needs an efficient outflow channel at high altitude, essentially a way to exhaust the warm, moist air that has risen through the storm's thunderstorm towers. When upper level outflow is well organized and unobstructed, the storm's internal circulation...
Okay, guys, you see how that works? See how here, which is upward, the air, the moist, however the temperature is, and then the ocean floor, what it does is rises and meet like this, and this is what causes the greater impact. Let's continue.
Circulation can spin up rapidly. Forecasters noted that developing upper-level outflow near Japan was actually enhancing Bavi's ability to intensify as it approached the Marianas. All three conditions aligned simultaneously over a 2-day period. The result was one of the faster intensification events seen in the Western Pacific in recent years, and it produced a storm that was significantly stronger at landfall than many residents had time to fully mentally process, even with days of advance warning. The reason rapid intensification is so dangerous from an emergency management perspective is the compression of preparation time. A storm that gradually builds over a week gives communities progressively escalating warnings. A storm that jumps from tropical storm to Category 5 in 48 hours delivers a much more abrupt escalation in the threat level. Warnings were issued efficiently for Bavi, and the communities in its path responded well, but the psychological challenge of hearing a forecast that says this storm will be much stronger in 24 hours than the models showed yesterday is real, and it requires trust in the forecasting process that not every community in every typhoon-prone region has built up over time. To fully understand why Bavi and Sinlaku hitting the northern Mariana Islands back-to-back in the same year is such a serious humanitarian and infrastructure crisis, it helps to understand the basic geography and vulnerability of these communities. The Northern Mariana Islands are a chain of 14 islands in the western Pacific Ocean, covering a total land area of about 180 square miles. The three main populated islands are Saipan, which is the largest with a population of roughly 48,000, Tinian with around 3,500 people, and Rota with approximately 2,000. The Commonwealth as a whole has a total population of about 52,000 people. Guam, which is a separate U.S. territory located about 40 miles southwest of Rota, has a population of roughly 160,000. These are small, remote communities separated from major supply chains by thousands of miles of open ocean. When a super typhoon damages infrastructure, roads, ports, power plants, water treatment facilities, hospitals, communication towers, the timeline to restore normalcy is measured in months, not weeks, because every piece of replacement equipment, every construction crew, every generator part has to be shipped or flown in from significant distances. The Sinlaku in April damaged that infrastructure severely. Power was still not fully restored to parts of Saipan and Tinian when Bavi arrived in July. That means Bavi was hitting communities that were already operating in a degraded state, running on backup generators in some areas, relying on emergency water distribution in others, with homes still under temporary roofing, where Sinlaku had destroyed original structures. The compounding effect of two major storms in the same year on the same small communities is not simply double the damage from one storm, double the damage to infrastructure that was already weakened, plus the psychological and economic burden on communities that had not had the chance to recover, plus the challenge of attracting reconstruction funding and contractor resources to the same location twice in a matter of months. Federal disaster declarations for Sinlaku were still being processed when Bavi formed. FEMA resources committed to Sinlaku recovery were still deployed when Bavi arrived. The question of how U.S. Pacific Island territories build and strengthen their long-term resilience against increasingly intense typhoon seasons is not just a weather question. It is a policy question, an infrastructure investment question, and ultimately a question about how seriously the federal government takes the vulnerability of these communities to climate-related disasters that are becoming more frequent in their intensity. While all eyes were on Bava bearing down on the Mariana Islands, meteorologists were simultaneously tracking a second tropical system that was much less dramatic in intensity, but still significant in terms of its impacts. The second system had developed from active tropical convection in the area east of the Philippines and was tracking northwestward toward China. Unlike Bavi, this was not a super typhoon situation. It was expected to remain at tropical storm level, but tropical storm level impacts are still meaningful. particularly for coastal areas that get the rainfall and storm surge associated with even moderate tropical systems. Track forecasts for the second system showed it approaching and making landfall along the Chinese coast around Saturday, July 4th, and early in the following week, bringing rainfall totals of 100 to 200 millimeters across parts of coastal China. Some areas could see higher totals where the terrain forces precipitation upward. China's southern coast is no stranger to Western Pacific tropical systems. The region receives multiple tropical cyclone impacts per year and has extensive experience with disaster preparation and response. But even for a prepared coastline, 100 to 200 millimeters of rain in a short period represents a significant flash flooding risk, particularly in low-lying areas and river deltas. Storm drainage systems in coastal Chinese cities are designed to handle significant rainfall, but the margins can be exceeded in extreme events. The broader picture around the same time showed elevated moisture and rainfall across a wide swath of Asia. Japan's Kyushu, Shikoku, and central Honshu were expected to see totals exceeding 100 millimeters over a 3-day period from atmospheric moisture connected to the activity in the Western Pacific. Parts of India, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Bangladesh, and Myanmar were experiencing heavy monsoon rainfall simultaneously, not directly related to Bava, but part of the same broader active pattern of moisture-laden weather systems that characterized the first week of July 2026 across the entire region. The Bay of Bengal was also being monitored for potential tropical development in the days following Bavi's landfall, with meteorologists watching whether conditions there might support a new tropical system forming in the early to middle part of July. The Bay of Bengal, the northeastern arm of the Indian Ocean, is the second most active tropical cyclone basin in the world during the summer monsoon season, and any development there would represent an additional threat to parts of Bangladesh, India, or Myanmar. That is the full picture of Super Typhoon Bavi, from the moment it was a barely organized tropical storm on July the 2nd to its Category 5 landfall on Rota, its impacts across Guam, Tinian, and Saipan, and its continued journey toward Taiwan and China with still significant intensity. The most important numbers to remember: peak sustained winds over 175 miles per hour, eye diameter 21 miles. Rainfall on Guam exceeding 12 inches in a single day, a record at the airport. Wind gusts of 111 miles per hour in Guam and Saipan. The eye passing directly over Rota with winds exceeding 150 miles per hour. And through all of it, 0 confirmed deaths on Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. The Western Pacific typhoon season has months left to run. More systems will form. Some will reach major intensity. The question of whether any of them will threaten the Mariana Islands again in 2026.
Guys, this is true. We just got into hurricane season. I do believe on July 2nd. But however, you have to be prepared literally, okay? Literally, because if you're not, things could get panicky and out of hand. We Floridians usually don't be like physically panically, but yes, if we need to get out, traffic gets backed up. Make sure you have your gas cans, your emergency backpack with your medicals, clothing, however, but you have to keep up with this, guys. It's called Hurricane Bava. Bava. That kind of sounds scary. But this thing's eye was 21 miles wide. Think about it. And please be prepared. Take note. Let your family know, your friends. And until. Thank you guys for joining me. And I'll keep you updated on Hurricane Bava and its motion. All in a Clan Lifestyle. Have a nice day.